The flame that devours modern man is not born from the world, but from within. It grows in the silence of impulsive reactions, in the invisible tremor that arises when someone touches the most fragile point of the soul. It is in that instant, in that small, almost imperceptible tremor, that Nietzsche emerges like a lucid shadow, leaning over the spirit and asking, "Who governs you? Your will, or that which wounds you?" The question is simple, but it pierces the chest like a blow. Because almost no one is ready to admit that they live governed by other people's emotions, trapped by every word the world throws as bait. Nietzsche always saw something too profound in hasty gestures, in immediate reactions, in the man who responds before thinking. For him, true slavery was never physical. It was emotional. The man who reacts unconsciously does not live. He is lived. And this realization, as ancient as it is disturbing, is what inaugurates this journey. Do you feel it? This sensation that something within you is being pulled, manipulated, molded by forces you don't see, but that you know by the disturbance they leave behind? This is the question that opens the way, and there is no turning back after it. Nietzsche doesn't appear here as a distant teacher, but as a sharp, almost oracular presence, piercing the inner fog and revealing what we prefer to hide. He knew that raw emotion, when not refined, acts as a cruel master. It promises authenticity, but delivers servitude. It says that liberating feelings is liberating oneself as a person, when in reality, it is merely opening the doors of the soul to be commanded by whatever can provoke it most intensely. The modern world has discovered this perfectly. It doesn't need to imprison anyone. It just needs to provoke. And at this point, Nietzsche smiles, not with joy, but with recognition. He had foreseen this collapse of autonomy long before algorithms were invented. Notice how everything around you tries to awaken something in you. A fear, an indignation, a comparison, a feeling of inadequacy or urgency. Whoever controls their emotions controls their attention, and whoever controls their attention controls their life force. Nietzsche would call this the morality of the weak, the silent game of those who lack inner strength, but know how to inflame the weakened so that they destroy themselves. This is how one governs the man who cannot control his own storm, not with weapons but with stimuli, not with violence, but with subtle invitations to react without thinking. The philosopher saw a cruel paradox in humanity. Everyone thinks they are free, but they live chained to what disturbs them. Everyone believes they have chosen their own path, but they rarely realize that they were guided by the emotion of the moment: fear, anger, pride, jealousy, the four shadows that shape entire destinies without leaving a trace. Nietzsche pointed out that most people don't think. They only reorganize feelings and call them thought. And behind this illusion lies an enormous danger. Those who live emotionally exposed are always governable. If you observe calmly, you will see how your own mind reacts before you choose to react. A sideways glance, an unanswered message, a hurtful comment, an old memory. Emotion arises before reason, as if it were an unwanted visitor entering without knocking. Nietzsche would say that this instant is the point where man reveals his true master. He is either master of himself, or he is carried away by the first impulse that appears. And perhaps this is the most uncomfortable point, admitting that there is an ancient, almost animal nature living within the mind, pulling the strings invisibly. But Nietzsche doesn't appear here to condemn this nature. He respects it. For him, strength lies not in eliminating emotions, but in transmuting them. Only the man who understands his own flame can mold it. Only those who face their shadows without trembling can polish pain and transform it into strength. The rest live like wax in the hands of the world. And perhaps you have already felt this, even without naming it. That sensation of acting, then thinking, and finally realizing that it wasn't you who acted. It was the emotion, too fast, too intense, too blind, and yet carrying your name. Nietzsche calls this phenomenon a small inner tyranny. A tyranny that doesn't arrive with shouts, but with impulses. A tyranny that doesn't imprison the body, but captures the will. He always knew that the first battlefield is one's own chest, and that many men lose before they even realize they are fighting. Because war doesn't begin when someone provokes you. It begins when your own inner self accepts being provoked. This is where the journey begins. Before discussing external manipulation, we need to look at the ruler that dwells within us, or at its absence. Nietzsche accompanies us as a stern but necessary guide. He doesn't offer comfort. He offers clarity. And clarity is the fire that burns away the most cherished illusions. He asks, do you react because you choose to, or because you don't know how to do anything else? This question should be unsettling. It was designed to be. All true growth begins with discomfort. And while this question echoes, Nietzsche leads us to the threshold of what will be revealed in the next stage, the profound mechanism by which emotion is constructed, manipulated, and refined until it becomes the perfect tool of control. But before understanding how the world shapes you, you need to recognize what within you allows itself to be shaped. Part 1 ends here, exactly where the tension begins. The next stage will delve into the hidden anatomy of emotions and show, with brutal clarity, how human nature can be captured without one realizing it. Prepare yourself, because what comes next is not comfortable, but it is necessary for those who wish to finally take control of their own destiny. As Nietzsche's presence intensified, as if his illuminated shadow touched every detail of daily life, the narrative shifted to an even more intimate terrain. He seemed to silently observe people's involuntary gestures, those movements that reveal more than any discourse. The way someone shrugs their shoulders while crossing the street, the mechanical haste in glancing at their watch, the sigh that escapes when no one is watching. Nietzsche showed that all this invisible choreography reveals an internal struggle that most prefer to ignore. In each person there was a silent battle, and it was precisely in this battle that the viewer could recognize their own hidden fears. On any given morning, while walking through a nearly empty square, someone bumped into you, offering an apology so automatic it seemed devoid of meaning. Nietzsche, like a guide who sees beyond the surface, invited us to look at the gesture more deeply. He suggested that this kind of automatism is not limited to social education, but to the very way many people live, repeating behaviors that no longer make sense, driven by old fears that have never been questioned. The common scene transformed into a symbolic image of the human soul, an existence driven by inherited impulses, patterns that function like invisible chains. As you observed the movement of the world, Nietzsche introduced an almost imperceptible tension. He provoked the idea that perhaps much of what we call personality is merely a set of conditioned responses. It was an uncomfortable suggestion because it called into question the sense of autonomy that everyone likes to believe they possess. And yet, there was something liberating in this provocation. It was as if, by revealing this dependence on habit, Nietzsche opened a crack through which a fresh air of possibility entered. The question arose like a disturbing whisper: how many of your choices are truly your own? To intensify this reflection, Nietzsche likened the narrative to experiences that anyone recognizes. Those moments when you feel you should say something, but prefer silence to avoid conflict. Or when you hold an opinion you don't fully believe in because you fear being seen as strange. Or even when you feel a strong creative impulse but repress it because you believe you're not ready, that you're not good enough, that you're not someone to dare so much. The viewer could see themselves in these situations as in a mirror, realizing that behind every hesitation, there is an emotional prison carefully constructed by society and reinforced by fear. Nietzsche walked among these scenes with a gaze that seemed to transcend time. He showed how each small gesture of conformity accumulates, creating an entire life shaped by external expectations. The mystery deepened when, suddenly, he suggested that the real danger is not making mistakes, but living without realizing that one is living a borrowed life. The everyday ceased to be everyday, and became a symbolic, almost ritualistic field, where each decision carried the invisible weight of one's own existence. And at the same time, within this tension arose the possibility of rupture. The unexpected turning point occurred when Nietzsche pointed out that these currents, although seemingly solid, are sustained by fragile beliefs. Beliefs that could be dissolved the moment an individual had the courage to confront them directly. It was as if he were calling the viewer to the center of a crossroads, to continue repeating roles that no longer make sense, or to accept the risk of creating a new way of existing. This choice, so simple in appearance, hid an abyss. But Nietzsche insisted that it is precisely in the abyss that one finds the clearest vision of one's own strength. At this point, everyday life took on even more vivid scenes. A person who, holding their cell phone, hesitates before sending a message that would reveal too much. Another who walks to work with an undefined weight on their chest, as if carrying a version of themselves they wish to abandon. Someone who looks in the mirror in the morning and feels that something is wrong, but can't explain exactly what it is. Nietzsche transformed these images into symbols. He showed that, in these daily micro-tensions, lies hidden the call to self-improvement. And by revealing this, the story gained an even more intense emotional force. As the viewer followed this journey, Nietzsche introduced a disturbing doubt, almost like a riddle. What if what you fear losing was never truly yours? The question arrived like a stone thrown into a silent lake, creating ripples that spread throughout the narrative. It was a provocation that did not seek to wound, but to awaken. As if, by touching on fear, he pointed to an inner space that has not yet been explored. A space where freedom is not just a concept, but a raw, visceral, non-negotiable experience. And when it seemed that the answers were within reach, Nietzsche would step back a little, letting silence take on the role of guide. It was a living silence, full of hidden meanings. In that interval, the viewer perceived that something was changing within them, as if their own perception was being rearranged. The narrative reached the end of this part with increasing tension, preparing the ground for the next movement. Nietzsche remained there, like a presence observing without haste, suggesting that there are even deeper truths waiting just ahead, ready to be revealed. Nietzsche advanced a little further, as if his own shadow became a path and not just a presence. There was something different in his gaze now, something that mixed lucidity and warning. He seemed to invite you to walk on the inner surface of your own mind, like someone crossing a narrow bridge that connects two states of consciousness. In this deeper terrain, the certainties of everyday life lost their power. Ideas that seemed unquestionable began to crumble like dust in the wind. It was in this silent dismantling that Nietzsche revealed a new perspective, that true transformation never occurs on the surface, but in the subterranean depths of the soul, where almost no one dares to enter. As you followed him through this inner layer, familiar scenes emerged disconcertingly, as if they had been rearranged. It was like recalling a significant moment in life and realizing there was a detail you had never seen before. Nietzsche explained that memory is not a static repository, but a living field that reorganizes everything according to the individual's courage to confront their own history. Each memory had multiple versions, and each version was shaped by the state of mind of the observer. At this point, a question arose like a direct blow. If your memory changes as you change, to what extent can you trust the image you have of yourself? This provocation created a momentary void, as if something essential were slipping through his fingers. Nietzsche allowed the silence to do its work, offering space for doubt to take root. He knew that it is precisely doubt that opens the fertile ground for transformation. Soon after, he would resume the narrative thread with a disconcerting calm, like someone handing over a key without explaining where the door is. The key, in this case, was the idea that every inner construction needs to be preceded by a collapse, however small, however silent. It was necessary to let the old structures crumble so that something authentic could emerge. And in an instant he would launch another question capable of cutting through the air. What in you still stands only because it has never been questioned? As this reflection deepened, Nietzsche revealed a novel, almost symbolic image. He spoke of the breath of the soul, an invisible movement that everyone performs without realizing it. This movement would be responsible for attracting experiences that correspond to each person's inner state. When the soul breathes fear, it attracts prisons. When it breathes courage, it attracts challenges that expand. When it breathes truth, it attracts unknown paths. It was a powerful metaphor, capable of transforming how the listener perceived all the coincidences that shaped their life. It was impossible to hear this without questioning. If everything you experience resonates with who you are, who have you been in recent years? With this image still pulsating, Nietzsche introduced a kind of subtle turning point. He reminded us that many desire change, but few are willing to confront the costs of that change. He asserted that every real metamorphosis carries a price, abandoning parts of oneself that have become dear only out of habit, breaking silent pacts with old versions of one's own identity, giving up comforts that, deep down, no longer serve. This process is not gentle, it is not romantic, it is visceral. And in the midst of this visceral intensity, Nietzsche posed another question that struck with precision. What do you still protect within yourself, simply because you fear the void that will arise when it disappears? The narrative gained even greater depth as Nietzsche approached an unexpected revelation. He asserted that the greatest lie one can tell oneself is believing one needs to discover who one is. For him, this idea is a diversion, an elegant escape. The problem has never been discovery, but creation. The human being is not a hidden essence waiting to be found, but a force in constant formation, an artist sculpting their own soul with daily choices, conscious or not. This statement inverted the logic of everything many believe about self-knowledge. And then, Nietzsche launched the thought-provoking argument. If you are not something to be discovered, but something to be created, what exactly have you created so far? As the question echoed, there was an almost imperceptible shift in the narrative atmosphere. The air seemed denser, as if reality were being observed from a different angle. Nietzsche's presence became simultaneously deeper and more distant, as if he were guiding without touching, leading you to recognize something that cannot be shown by words. He was now speaking about the power of an intimate decision, one that no one sees, no one applauds, and no one validates, but which silently transforms one's entire life. He said that the greatest personal revolution happens the instant someone decides to no longer betray their own strength. And before this statement could settle, he delivered the last question of this part, a seed that would germinate later. If you stopped betraying your own strength today, what version of yourself would be born tomorrow? The inner chapter seemed to close here, but there was no sense of completion. There was movement, restlessness, and a calling that had not yet fully revealed itself. Nietzsche remained by her side like a living enigma, suggesting that the next step would require more than understanding. It would require courage. Nietzsche continued as if guiding you through an invisible corridor between inner worlds. The atmosphere seemed thicker, as if each step revealed something that had always been there, but remained hidden until that moment. At a certain point, he stopped before a seemingly simple scene, an old clock resting on a wooden bench. The hand showed an ordinary time, yet Nietzsche observed it as if he were before a sacred artifact. He commented that this clock, bought decades before by some unknown person, had survived silent changes that no one recorded. Changes in mood, routine, family. How many hands had touched it? How many decisions had been made while its hands turned? Nietzsche revealed that objects hold stories as deeply as people do, and that the narrative of the world is not sustained only by great events, but by minutiae that almost always go unnoticed. This seemingly trivial detail gained strength when Nietzsche mentioned that studies show most people don't even remember precisely what they did the previous morning. The brain discards a good portion of what we experience to conserve energy. The irony, he said, is that many believe they control their own days, when in reality they leave behind important fragments of their own journey. He recounted a curious case of a German neuroscientist who recorded every spontaneous thought that arose in his mind for a year. The final result showed a disturbing pattern. Almost 90% of the thoughts were repeated, recycled, inherited from previous days. Nietzsche used this improbable data to reinforce the idea that most people live imprisoned within an inner circle, whose existence they are not even aware of. And then, he asked with gentle coldness, if you repeat the same thoughts every day, how do you expect to create a different life? The question hung in the air like a reverberating snap. Nietzsche was walking again, but now he was guiding you to a specific memory, one you hadn't revisited in a long time. He showed how certain memories return unexpectedly, as if arising from a silent call. He recounted the improbable story of a man who, after decades without thinking about his childhood, suddenly recalled the smell of a forgotten place. Following this detail, He found in the memory an old decision that had shaped his entire adult life. This decision was neither logical nor elaborate. It was simply a phrase uttered by someone during an ordinary moment. Nietzsche emphasized that many profound decisions are made unconsciously, and yet trace entire paths. He questioned, how many of your choices were born from moments so small that you didn't even notice them? The narrative deepened as Nietzsche led us to an even more improbable episode. He spoke of a traveler who crossed the border of 3 countries without realizing it. He was too immersed in his thoughts to notice the signs, the markings on the ground, the language on the facades. He only realized where he was when he heard unfamiliar music coming from a window. Nietzsche used this story to show that, even in clear physical movements, the mind can remain blind. And then he launched another penetrating provocation. If you can cross borders without realizing it, how many internal borders have you crossed without noticing? How many limits, beliefs, or fears have you surpassed without understanding the meaning of it? At every turn, Nietzsche revealed hidden elements of human routine. He commented on an improbable study conducted with volunteers in an isolated laboratory. They were left without clocks, without access to natural light, without external stimuli. The sole purpose was to observe how the body and mind reorganized themselves in the void. After a few days, almost all reported strange experiences, more vivid dreams, old memories, fears that had never been named. Nietzsche emphasized that when the noise of the world diminishes, inner truth increases. And then, like someone turning on a lamp in a dark room, he asked, "What would you discover about yourself if silence were the only answer available?" This question opened up a moment of suspension. The narrative seemed to expand the surrounding air, as if inviting the viewer to feel the presence of their own inner emptiness. Nietzsche walked back to the initial scene of the clock and touched it lightly, producing a soft, almost imperceptible sound. He explained that even the smallest sound can alter the perception of someone who is attentive. He revealed that some experimental physicists had observed seemingly impossible phenomena, such as particles that change their behavior when observed. He used this data to suggest that human attention is capable of altering not only the perception of reality, but reality itself. This completely changed the course of the reflection. Nietzsche then asked, "If the simple act of looking transforms the world, where have you been directing your gaze?" From this provocation, he created an almost palpable atmosphere of mystery. It was as if the narrative opened a door without yet revealing what lay on the other side. Nietzsche was now speaking about the discrete force that shapes destiny, the one that manifests itself in unexpected encounters, spontaneous detours, and failures that push towards new paths. He mentioned accounts of people whose lives changed because they missed a bus, dropped an object, or overheard a phrase by chance. These were simple, improbable events, but they functioned as keys. Nietzsche asserted that life sometimes hides portals within the smallest accidents. And then, with a look that seemed to contain something unspoken, he left the final provocation of this part hanging in the air. How many portals have you already crossed without realizing it? And how many are still waiting for you? Nietzsche advanced as if he had found something that could not yet be revealed, but whose presence already altered the air around him. His posture was firmer, and the silence between his words seemed to carry a new urgency. He walked down a narrow corridor, illuminated only by a faint light that seemed to come from nowhere. You followed him, noticing that each step left a feeling of expectation, as if a turning point were near. Nietzsche then stopped suddenly and observed a closed door, simple and unadorned. He did not touch it, only stared at it with an intensity that made the surface of the wood seem more alive. He said that every person possesses such a door within themselves, an entrance they avoid opening because they fear what they might find. And he added, in a low voice, "The fear of crossing that door is what keeps most people trapped in what they should have abandoned long ago." The walk continued, but you could still feel the presence of that door pulsing in your memory. Nietzsche was now talking about an inner movement that precedes every great turning point in life. He mentioned that before a real change occurs, the individual usually experiences a period of silent tension. It's as if the spirit stretches beyond its current form, preparing space for something greater. During this process, it's common to feel restlessness, irritation without reason, a sense that something needs to change, but it's not yet clear what. Nietzsche insisted that this period is not a mistake, but an announcement, a warning that the old no longer serves, even if the new doesn't yet have a name. He asked directly, "Have you noticed these signs, or are you still trying to silence them?" The pace of the story quickened as Nietzsche began to reveal details that seemed to break with common logic. He recounted the striking case of a woman who, after years of feeling her life was stagnant, began to repeatedly dream of a place she had never visited. In her dreams, there was an ancient building with tall windows and the sound of running water in the background. Feeling that it carried a hidden meaning, she decided to travel to a mountainous region where she believed the scene might exist. The surprising part came when Nietzsche said that upon arriving there, she found exactly the building from her dreams. She felt as if something inside her finally reorganized itself, as if that vision had always been an inner calling. He used this story to show that life sends signals even to those who don't know how to listen to them. And then he posed the question that cut like a blade. How many signals have you ignored, believing they were just coincidences? Nietzsche stopped in front of a window overlooking an undefined horizon, where the sky seemed to blend with everything around it. He was now talking about the weight people carry unnecessarily. He mentioned that suffering often doesn't come from what happens, but from the rigid interpretation one makes of events. He reminded us that it's possible to free oneself from old burdens not by force, but by lucidity. To illustrate this, he recounted a surprising story of a man who had harbored guilt for decades, for something he believed he had caused in his youth. Upon meeting the person involved in the event again, now elderly, he discovered that the man's memory was distorted, and that the guilt that had accompanied him his entire life was based on a mistaken version of the past. Nietzsche used this episode to show that the mind can transform small shadows into monsters, and he asked, "What within you still grows because it has never been examined with sufficient light?" The tension increased as Nietzsche began to walk faster, as if approaching a crucial point. He was now talking about the limits people unconsciously create, silent beliefs that shape their inner workings. He said that many believe they cannot go further because they have accepted as reality a limit that perhaps never existed. He recounted the improbable story of an athlete who believed for years that he had a permanent injury and therefore avoided intense training. Only after a thorough analysis did he discover that there had never been any injury. What existed was a misinterpreted diagnosis. The limitation was a ghost sustained by fear. Nietzsche looked directly at you and asked, "How many illusions do you still depend on to justify the life you lead?" The atmosphere seemed to shift as the words echoed. The narrative acquired a more vivid, almost unsettling rhythm. Nietzsche then presented an unexpected twist. He said that even when the individual awakens to their illusions, there is still one last internal resistance: attachment to the known. Familiarity functions as a safe haven, even when that haven no longer offers shelter. But Nietzsche asserted that there is a point where remaining becomes more risky than leaving. He spoke of ancient navigators who, having lost their maps during storms, had to rely only on instinct and the sky. Many of them discovered new routes precisely because they stopped being guided by what was safe. He approached you with a firm gentleness and asked, "Are you willing to lose your maps to find new territory within yourself?" The air grew thicker, as if something invisible was about to reveal itself. Nietzsche stopped before a second door, more imposing than the first, and this time placed his hand on it. He said that throughout everything shown so far, you have crossed internal boundaries without realizing it. But now, a conscious choice approaches. He indicated that behind this door, the narrative will cease to be merely understanding and will touch something deeper, more decisive, something that will demand real courage. He took a deep breath and concluded with a calmness that contrasted with the growing tension. Every journey reaches a point where it is no longer possible to return to the previous state. And then, leaving the door ajar, he provoked the final impulse of this part. Are you ready to cross that which will ultimately define what comes next? Nietzsche held his hand on the half-open door for a few seconds, as if offering one last instant for you to realize the importance of the moment. He then slowly pushed the wood open, revealing a vast, silent space illuminated by a light that came from no visible source. It was a place that wasn't physical, but felt more real than any setting you had traversed so far. Nietzsche entered first, with firm steps, inviting you to follow him. As soon as you crossed the threshold, you realized that everything in that environment reflected not objects but internal states. Memories, decisions, fears, and forces that seemed to take on a form of their own. It was like entering yourself for the first time with full awareness. Nietzsche walked calmly through the space, explaining that this environment symbolized what people rarely access, the territory of true choice. He said that throughout life, many believe they consciously choose their paths, but in reality, they only react to what is imposed upon them. For him, true freedom begins when the individual understands that they can shape their own destiny through clarity and self-mastery. He approached a projection that seemed to pulsate intensely, an image of himself, representing what he had been until now. There was no criticism, only recognition. Nietzsche explained that it is not about denying the past, but about understanding it with enough lucidity to transform it into raw material. Life, he said, is not a burden to carry, but something that can be recreated at every moment. He then led you to another image, this time representing what you could become if you decided to live with courage and responsibility for yourself. The figure was not perfect, nor complete. It was mutable, open, vibrant. Nietzsche stated that no human being is destined to replicate their previous history. Destiny is not a fixed track, but a flame that responds to the intensity with which one lives. If you change your inner posture, the world changes before your eyes. He asked with the gentleness of someone who knows the weight of the decision, what version of yourself are you willing to sustain from now on? The environment began to expand, revealing new possibilities, as if each of your thoughts opened a different path. Nietzsche explained that applying everything seen so far requires 3 essential movements: recognizing, choosing, and sustaining. Recognizing what you repeat unconsciously, what you fear without questioning, and what you desire without admitting. Consciously choosing what the next step will be, even if small, even if uncertain, and sustaining that choice when the world asks you to return to the old pattern. He said that strength lies not in grand gestures, but in continuity. It's not necessary to transform your entire life at once. It's enough to change 1 degree at a time. A habit, a posture, a speech, a decision. That's enough to rotate the entire internal axis. Nietzsche then offered a practical image. He showed someone waking up just 10 minutes earlier to spend some time in silence before starting their day. By creating this small space of lucidity, this person altered how they reacted to difficulties. In another scene, someone said no for the first time after years of giving into everything. This simple act reorganized their sense of self-worth. Next, a person interrupted a recurring negative thought and chose to redirect it. Through repetition, their mind began to operate differently. Nietzsche asserted that these small actions are seeds capable of altering the entire terrain of existence. He looked directly at you and said that no profound transformation is born from despair, but from the quiet decision to begin. The narrative took on a more emotional tone as Nietzsche approached the center of the room, where a kind of liquid mirror reflected not the face, but the intention. He explained that what you hold internally inevitably projects itself into reality. If you live in fear, you attract experiences that confirm that fear. If you live with strength, you find paths that demand strength. If you live with authenticity, you attract opportunities that correspond to who you truly are. Nietzsche said that life responds precisely to each person's vibration, and that understanding this is taking control of one's own destiny. He then asked, with an almost sacred firmness, "What intention do you wish to put into the world from today onward?" Emotional tension grew as everything around began to vibrate, as if the environment awaited his decision. Nietzsche stood beside him, no longer as a distant guide, but as a presence that recognized his ability to walk alone. He said that no one is condemned to remain as they are. The human being is a work in constant construction, and each choice is a chisel stroke that strengthens or weakens the very form. He reinforced that there is no perfect moment to begin, because the beginning always happens in the present. The past can no longer be changed, and the future does not yet exist. All you have is now, and now is enough. The space began to slowly dissolve, as if fulfilling its purpose. Nietzsche opened the door once more and gestured for you to cross. As you exited, you realized that something fundamental had changed. It wasn't an explosive feeling, but a firm, tranquil, profound clarity. The narrative was coming to an end, but the real journey was only beginning. Nietzsche concluded in a serene voice, saying that each person has within themselves the necessary strength to overcome what they believe to be impossible. One only needs to choose a point, initiate a movement, and sustain it. Life will respond. And now, before you move on to the next step, I have a direct invitation. If this content touched you in any way, please like this video, leave a comment, even if it's anonymous, and subscribe to the channel. Your participation helps keep this journey alive and allows more people to find their own inner paths. The next step is yours.